All right, bear with me. I gotta get mic'd up here. Sorry for the awkwardness, but the opportunity to give yourself a piggyback is one that is rare, novel, and should never be passed up. So, hi, I'm Kevin Connolly. As per the introduction, I was born without legs. I figured we would get that out of the way earlier. This is my second half, and almost as unique as being born without legs as a totally otherwise healthy baby was the fact that I was born in Montana. Now, for those that haven't been in Montana before, we're almost more of like a territory. There's not many of us. And what I found, as a young kid, and certainly my parents echoed this, was that we kind of sat outside of the realm of, Western medicine and a lot of the hospitals that would provide kind of predetermined answers for someone with a physical disability. So, instead of standing in a hospital or sitting in a hospital in a wheelchair, most of my time was actually spent a little bit more like this. Montana's winter is usually about 9 months out of the year, so you're pretty much buried in snow almost all the time. Between that and camping, because of course we don't have pro sports teams or resorts or theme parks or anything else, this was pretty much how I occupied my time. And my parents took it upon themselves from a pretty early age to try and just get around any obstacle that we could, regardless of how it looked like or how it was built. Now, contrasting that was the doctors and prostheticists that I met very early on at Shriners Hospital in Spokane, Washington. Now, I remember pretty clearly as a little kid sitting in a whitewashed hospital room and seeing a half dozen doctors sitting around a table, and they were all kind of vexed by this question. This kid without legs has problems getting around. So their answer from the get-go was to try and give me legs. Now, the problem with this was the fact that I didn't have stumps. I didn't have anything that would allow me to make a bipedal motion. That's what you guys, for the most part, do. Instead, how I have to walk is something called a swing-through gait, all right? Keep that in your head because it's going to come up a little bit later. So what ended up happening was I was kind of put into a pair of stilts, i.e. these things. And for the most part, if you ever saw me in my legs as a little kid, this is what it looked like, kind of nicely posed for Christmas photos. But see, this is the thing, is that you couldn't actually move around in these things at all. If so, you needed crutches, and for the most part, they were just these ungangly beasts. And so, the question that I would maybe pose to you guys is, how long would you be willing to wear stilts in order to look like everybody else? Now, maybe as well-adjusted adults, you could, pass that off for quite a while, but as an angst-ridden teenager, you get sore and tired of that pretty quickly. So for the most part, anytime I needed to move around, this was more likely the photo. This is actually, ironically enough, walking to the hospital trying to cross the street, and I was so much more faster on my hands that Mom would oftentimes carry the legs. And in fact, if I was to have walked out in these things, it would have been a lot slower than if I would have given them a piggyback, which I don't even think we need to get into the performative layers of that one. So what we often found when we weren't in this kind of hospital system out on the West Coast, what we found was that solving problems when you weren't worried about what you looked like, you weren't concerned about what looked normal, oftentimes the solutions were wonderfully simple and much more effective than the multi-$1,000 counterparts that were provided to us by doctors. So this thing, and I'm not very good with names, so we're just going to call it a butt boot, okay? Now, I mentioned a little while ago that Montana has about 9 months out of the year is winter. And what we saved on shoes, while I was growing up, we oftentimes lost on pants through dragging them through rock, dirt, and all sorts of snow. So rather than jump in legs and try and hobble around on your crutches, my dad approached a local cobbler in my hometown of Helena, Montana, and had him make me basically a set of pants out of deerskin. So rather than a butt boot, I guess it would have been, the first one was more of like a butt moccasin. You could stalk deer through the woods. It was great. And this solution, which was much cheaper, much more easily repairable, and ultimately you could find every piece to this device within a couple miles of where you lived, was much more liberating than something like this that took a couple months in order to send back and forth, lots of money in order to build, and usually you were building them with custom fabricated parts. Now, as I got a bit older and started traveling for my photo project that I think was mentioned a little while ago, I ended up using a skateboard. This is how my point of view looks when I'm looking down right now, so we can all have kind of a group moment together. And funny enough, the message on the bottom has a very, very long-winded, please, you have a no-legged guy's skateboard, do not steal this. If you have a change of heart, email me. But what I found was that, this again, and maybe here's a movie to roll in the background while I try and explain this. This, again, as you can see, was way more efficient than running on my hands or, using these things. Obviously, you're getting stared at, and people may or may not be a little frightened of a legless guy moving at 20 miles an hour on the ground. But at the end of the day, you're going to get stared at in these anyway. And, for me, efficiency was way more important than anything that these could provide. Now, the other cool thing, and I think something that, a lot of people maybe discount unless they have dealt with a physical disability before, is the fact that the skateboard and the butt boot were incredibly liberating, and I'm going to say this in terms of where I'm even sitting right now. They could be repaired or rebuilt within a 10-block square radius of actually where we're all sitting right now. Not having to deal with hospitals or doctors or, the time it takes to custom build something for you is incredibly liberating. This was taken in Dubrovnik, Croatia, and even if something broke there, Bosnia, Montenegro, China, any of the places I went, as long as I had some power tools, a hardware store, and maybe a couple bits of leather, for the most part, I'd be good to go. Excuse me. So, over the past couple years, I've started trying to take this to new levels. The idea of, okay, so what if we get rid of this underlying paradigm that all prosthetics had to make someone look normal, or, had to look close to the human, the average human counterpart? What possibilities can be afforded to you when you try and design a prosthetic outside of that realm? So this was kind of the first thing that I came upon. And note the googly eyes. These are their real-life counterparts right here. And I call them, I guess, cheetah legs. They were built for about $500 in parts. And again, it could all be rebuilt within about a 10-square block radius of here. And the cool thing about these, and we're going to flip through really quickly. The cool thing about these is that it utilizes the exact same way I move now. We use the swing-through gait. Remember, I talked about that earlier. And you're only about 6 inches off the ground, so you haven't radically compromised your center of gravity. Now, the only real thing that this does is it gives me about a 2-foot standing vertical leap, which looks frightening as hell. And it also allows you to gallop at speeds that are about twice the speed as I would walking on my hands. Okay? So again, you're getting stared at, but you're also getting to do things that your body could have never done before. And in some ways is more capable of, the human counterpart. In this case, it would probably be whatever your legs are. This is another one bounding through the wild grasslands of Wyoming. And this is the next design that I began working on with actually a local firm here in Bozeman. This is a monoski. Some people, especially in the adaptive sporting community, knows what it is. But the important thing to note is that in a lot of ways, it's much, much more effective than a pair of legs on a ski hill would be. Granted, you look like a frightening kind of android cyborg thing, which, as an aside, if you're ever asked that by a frightened little 8-year-old, the best answer you can possibly give is just a stone-cold affirmative. But it works fantastically well. Your quads don't get tired when you're going through crud and powder. If you blow a knee, rather than have to go through 6 months of physical rehabilitation, you replace the shock that's currently leaking oil. And in a lot of ways, because you have a lower center of gravity with a higher weight to surface ratio, you actually have better aerodynamic capabilities than anybody, no matter what kind of tuck they get into. Here's a shot of it in action. And this final project that I'm working on currently is trying to actively assault these boundaries of what looks normal and how much better can we design ourselves and our prosthetics if we try and get rid of all of that, that kind of undefined rule set. This one is actually, normally I ride a skateboard, and this was kind of my attempt to make it a skateboard 2.0. This was actually filmed in Hawaii in January, I believe, when I was working on a TV show that's going to be coming out. And it is a mountain board that we took, and we decided we needed to enhance it. So after adding some suspension to it, we figured it would be good to put a 52cc engine to the back of it. It has a lawnmower pull start and everything. It's wonderful. And then realizing that I didn't have enough leverage because of how low I sat on the board, we needed some handlebars. So we went and we bought 22-inch motorcycle chopper bars with have a full throttle and brake system and everything else. So normally people get scared when they see me riding on the skateboard, but when that's coupled with the high engine pitch of a they freak out twice as bad. But all of these new devices just create an even larger contrast than what I was faced with early on in my life, i.e. these things. I'm going to end the talk on maybe taking challenge or issue with another TED alumni, Amy Mullins, who gave a wonderful talk in 2009. She is a model, athlete, and double amputee. And the title of her talk was, "My Legs Give Me Superpowers." And after everything I've seen and lived in my life, I tend to disagree. I don't think legs give you superpowers. I think design does.